Well, Trump's pick for RFK Jr. to lead the Health and Human Services Department has put pharmaceutical stocks under pressure, and the ripple effect could put even more pressure on some big names in the GLP-1 space. Joining us now is Chris Meekins, Raymond James, Managing Director and Washington Health Policy Research Analyst. Chris, it is good to see you. So early days here, we're not even clear whether RFK Jr. does get confirmed by the Senate, but I'm sure regardless, Chris, you must be getting a lot of phone calls and questions from clients about RFK Jr. And specifically, I'm curious, Chris, in particular, GLP-1s. What are you telling your clients, Chris? Your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a very busy time. So the reality is, over the last 2 weeks, I've had about as many clients ping me as I do in 2.5 months on average. So clearly a hot topic, and I think you're seeing that reaction in the space. What we're telling clients is that it's very clear that if RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would be confirmed by the United States Senate, that this is not someone who thinks highly of the pharmaceutical industry. He's someone who believes Americans far too often are reliant on pharmaceuticals rather than other healthy options, that Americans do not eat healthy food, do not take appropriate steps to improve their health, and that the pharmaceutical industry has benefited from this, and that the pharmaceutical industry has helped contribute to this. He has previously been very critical of GLP-1s and this idea that instead of addressing the root cause of why we have this epidemic of obesity in the United States. Instead, Americans are moving toward just paying to try to have a drug that can solve it. So he really believes you need to get back toward healthy living, healthy eating as root causes here, rather than just try to, take a shot now or eventually pop a pill that these drugs provide.
Hey, Chris, it's Julie here. I have a bit of a multi-part question for you, so stick with me. You said if he does get confirmed. So I guess tell us whether you think he's going to get confirmed. If he doesn't, could it be a recess appointment to sort of circumvent that? We've heard that maybe those are possibilities. And if that doesn't happen, could he get some other sort of advisory role where he would have an influence?
Those are all great questions, and usually they take me about 30 minutes to answer, but I'll try to do it in the next 30 seconds for clients. So the reality is that, and I will tell you here, Raymond James, we're not just trying to tell you what's likely to happen. We also try to keep track of market sentiment. For example, our healthcare specialist, Rachel Steffen, did a client survey on Friday. More than 100 clients responded in the first 20 minutes asking how likely is RFK to be confirmed. And the answer was more than 70% likely is what clients were thinking. I think that's reflected in the stocks. My view is that the odds are less than 50% he gets across the finish line. You need just 4 Republican senators to say not quite there. You have Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Mitch McConnell, a polio survivor before the vaccine was available. And you've got Tom Tillis, Todd Young, a wide range of more than a dozen senators we've identified as potentially being in play to be no votes going forward. Now, the president could attempt a recess appointment, but Democrats would have to go along under the current rules, or Senate Republicans would have to change the rules, or the president would have to exercise an authority no president in our nation's more than 200 and almost 50-year history has ever done moving forward, and run the risk of courts overruling him for that. But regardless, I do think you're right that RFK Jr. does likely have a place to help influence policy. And I think that influence is actually going to be more on the healthy food side and maybe vaccine to some degree, rather than on drug approval and whether or not Medicare is going to cover these drugs for different indications.
Let's play out just the chance, Chris. Let's say he does get confirmed by the Senate. And we know he is skeptical of the GLP-1s. I mean, he's made that very clear. I guess my question is, what impact could he actually have, in terms of policy? Could he, for example, Chris, would he have the power to derail efforts by these GLP-1 makers to gain Medicare coverage, for example?
As the secretary, he would. I mean, Congress has to pass a law to allow Medicare to cover it specifically for obesity. The president could veto that law if the law doesn't get done before January 20th. So he could advise the president to veto that going forward. The thing with RFK Jr., I think if we step back, is he has a lot of different views, right? So right now, the danger for investors is there may be 100 different things he can do. when you're secretary, your time gets sucked up with a wide variety of other stuff. I know that. I was at HHS. I saw that happen to secretaries with extensive executive branch experience and executive management experience, neither of which RFK Jr. has much of at this point. And even they had a hard time getting their stuff done. So out of 100 things he says, he may get 2, 3, 4 things across the finish line. It's being able to identify what those 2, 3, 4 things are. I think GLP-1s are one of those things he's talking about, but there's probably others that are more likely where he could have a significant impact outside the GLP-1 space. So the sell-off we've seen might be a little bit overdone compared to what the reality could end up at the end of the day.
Well, and on that front, of course, he's most famous for being a vocal vaccine skeptic, Chris. I believe he said publicly he would not take vaccines away from people, but these stocks have really sold off significantly here. Of course, I guess the irony is, I mean, yes, something like Moderna is very reliant on a vaccine, but most of the companies that make the wide variety of vaccines that are now mandated by, say, school districts, et cetera, it's not really like the cash cow, right?
I think you're exactly right. It isn't. You know, if these are generics vaccines, have been around a long time. They have largely been proven to be very effective. You just have to look at polio and measles as examples of that. What I will say is that when looking at the approach to what he could do on vaccines, there's a breadth of things he could do around the ACIP at CDC for recommendations, around approvals, around requesting more information. But that all of that takes time. And the time is one of the most fleeting resources in an administration. And the longer it takes to get confirmed, the more drama there is around that, the likelihood of getting people confirmed and willing to work under him with his views and aligned with his views and execute his views, and the ability of the bureaucracy to bite back, which it can do. It's extremely hard to get things done in government, for better or worse, if the bureaucrats and career staff are not aligned with your views, which they will not be on vaccines with them at this point. So I think that when we look at this, his rhetoric around that obviously is something investors are concerned about. The reality of what he'll actually be able to get across the finish line and the real impact on the sales of these products is probably less than what you've seen the sell-off justify in recent days.
All right. Looking forward to this confirmation hearing. Could get interesting. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.